The Holy Vehm, the full history of Germany's secret judge society, explained. Imagine a time of lawlessness, an age when the authority of emperors and kings was weak, and the land was stalked by robber barons and petty tyrants. In this world, justice was a fragile and distant dream. But in the heart of the old German Empire, in the red earth of Westphalia, a different kind of justice was whispered to exist. A secret justice, a tribunal that met in hidden places, under the open sky or in subterranean chambers. Its judges were sworn initiates, its proceedings were shrouded in arcane ritual, and its sentences were absolute. If you were summoned by them, you would find a dagger pinned to your door, a secret summons that you could not ignore. If you were judged guilty in their court, you would be found hanging from the nearest tree, a dagger bearing a cryptic symbol left to announce that this was not a common murder, but a holy execution. They were the Vehmic courts, the Holy Vehm. Were they a legitimate, secret imperial court, the last remnant of ancient Germanic law? Were they a vigilante conspiracy, a medieval secret society that took the law into its own hands? Or were they something more? A legend whose terror and romance would haunt the German imagination for centuries. This is the story of Germany's secret medieval tribunals. To understand the rise of a secret court, you must first understand the collapse of public law. To find the origins of a brotherhood that judged in the shadows, we must begin our journey in a land that was, in many ways, a land without a king. We must travel back to the heart of the late Middle Ages, to the vast, sprawling, and dangerously fractured territory known as the Holy Roman Empire. The name itself, as the French philosopher Voltaire would later famously quip, was a beautiful lie. It was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. In reality, it was a bewildering and often ungovernable patchwork of hundreds of separate, competing entities. It was a mosaic of powerful duchies, margraviates, counties, prince-bishoprics, and fiercely independent free cities, all loosely bound together under the authority of a single elected emperor. But the emperor's authority was a fragile and distant thing. Unlike the strong, centralized monarchies that were beginning to forge the modern nations of France and England, the Holy Roman Emperor was not an absolute ruler. He was a monarch elected by a handful of powerful German princes, and he was constantly locked in a struggle for power with his own most powerful vassals. The great dukes of Saxony, Bavaria, and Brandenburg often acted as independent kings within their own domains, jealously guarding their privileges and resisting any attempt at imperial centralization. Compounding this weakness was a centuries-long imperial obsession, a golden, costly, and ultimately ruinous dream, the dream of Italy. From the time of Charlemagne, the German emperors had also claimed the title of King of Italy and saw themselves as the rightful heirs of the Caesars. They poured immense resources, vast sums of gold, and the lives of thousands of their German soldiers into a series of endless, bloody campaigns south of the Alps, trying to impose their authority on the rebellious city-states of Lombardy and the defiant papacy in Rome. This Italian obsession had devastating consequences for the German heartlands. With the emperor so often absent, campaigning in a foreign land, or bogged down in complex Italian politics, his authority at home withered. He became a distant figure, unable to effectively enforce the law, to protect the roads, or to dispense justice throughout his own realm. This imperial weakness created a power vacuum, and into that vacuum crept chaos. The 13th and 14th centuries, the period of the Great Interregnum and the decades that followed, were a time of endemic lawlessness. The Grand Emperor's peace, the Landfrieden, was often little more than a piece of parchment. The real law of the land became Faustrecht, literally, fist law, the law of the strongest. Across the German lands, a class of predatory minor nobles, the Roberter or robber barons, turned to banditry. From their fortified castles perched on strategic hills and river bends, they acted as little more than glorified highwaymen. They would stretch heavy chains across rivers to stop trading vessels and demand exorbitant tolls. They would ambush merchant caravans on the roads, stealing their goods and holding the merchants for ransom. Travel and commerce became fraught with peril. The great nobles, in turn, engaged in endless, destructive private wars known as Fehden. A dispute over a piece of land, an insult to a family's honor, a contested inheritance, any of these could be the pretext for a war that would see villages burned, fields destroyed, and peasants slaughtered. In this world, formal justice was often a cruel joke. The local courts were frequently controlled by the very same petty lords who were perpetrating the violence. A common man had little hope of finding justice against a powerful nobleman. Justice became a commodity, sold to the highest bidder or dispensed at the point of a sword. For the ordinary person, the farmer, the merchant, the artisan, there was often no higher authority to appeal to. The emperor was too far away, and his laws were unenforceable. The land was crying out for order, for a power that could punish the wicked and protect the weak. It was in this crucible of anarchy, in a very specific part of the German heartland, that a strange and ancient institution would rise from obscurity to answer that cry. That land was Westphalia. Westphalia was a region with a powerful and unique identity. It lay on the Red Earth, a name that was said to refer not just to its iron-rich soil, but to the blood that had been spilt there in the defense of its ancient freedoms. This was the ancestral homeland of the Saxons, the fierce Germanic tribe that had been the last to be conquered by the great Emperor Charlemagne in the 8th century. A potent myth, passed down through generations, held that Charlemagne himself, after his long and brutal war to subdue and convert the pagan Saxons, had granted the free men of Westphalia a special and secret privilege. In return for their loyalty, he supposedly gave them a secret imperial charter, a mandate to act as his direct agents of justice. He empowered them to hold their own free courts, to hunt down, judge, and execute criminals in his name, an authority that superseded that of any local count or duke. Did this charter from Charlemagne ever really exist? Almost certainly not. There is no historical record of it. But the myth was what mattered. It gave the courts that operated in this region a powerful aura of ancient, sacred legitimacy. They were not, they claimed, simply vigilantes. They were the inheritors of an imperial mandate, the secret keepers of the true old Germanic law. These were the Freigericht, the free courts, and the secret brotherhood of initiated judges who presided over them were the keepers of the holy Vehm. As the authority of the emperor weakened and the fist of the robber baron tightened its grip, the power and the terrifying reputation of this secret, parallel justice system began to spread far beyond the borders of the Red Earth. A secret court needs secret judges. The power of the holy Vehm did not reside in a grand courthouse or a royal edict. It resided in the men who were its members. This was not a professional judiciary in the modern sense. It was a secret society, a sworn brotherhood of initiates who were bound together by a sacred oath and a shared, secret knowledge. They were known as the Freischaffiner word that can be translated as the free jurors or free judges. And they were everywhere. A Schaff was not defined by his rank or his profession. He could be a nobleman, a wealthy burgher, a humble artisan, or a simple free farmer. What mattered was not his station in life, but his character and his initiation into what they called the Heimliche Wissenschaft, the secret science or secret knowledge of the Vehm. This vast, clandestine network of initiated men, scattered throughout the towns and villages of the land, was the true source of the court's power. They were its eyes, its ears, and, when necessary, its executioners. Becoming a Freischaff was not a right. It was a privilege granted only after a period of scrutiny. The requirements were strict and reflected the values of the time. To be considered for initiation, a candidate had to be a real, true, and free man. This meant he had to be born in lawful wedlock to German parents, and he could not be a serf but a free man. He had to be a Christian and specifically not a member of the clergy. The Vehm was a secular court, and priests and monks were forbidden from joining, as their vows of obedience to the church would conflict with their oaths to the secret tribunal. And, of course, he could not be a known criminal, a heretic, and excommunicate a heathen or a Jew. Above all, he had to be a man of good repute, someone known in his community for his honor and integrity. A sponsor, an existing Schaff, had to vouch for him, putting his own life and honor on the line for the quality of the new recruit. If the candidate was deemed worthy, he would be summoned to a secret initiation, a solemn and terrifying ceremony designed to bind him to the brotherhood for life, with his own life as the ultimate collateral. The initiation was a powerful piece of psychological theater. The candidate, known as a Liesfrone, would be brought before a Freistall, a free seat of judgment, where a court was convened under the open sky. He would stand before the presiding judge, the Freigraf or free count. On a table before the judge lay two powerful symbols: a sword, representing the court's power to judge and to strike, and a strang, a twisted withe or rope, representing the hangman's noose, the ultimate penalty of the Vehm. The candidate would be made to kneel. He would be stripped of all weapons. He then had to place the thumb and forefinger of his right hand upon the sword and the rope, a direct, physical contact with the instruments of the court's power. And in this position he would swear the oath. The oath was the heart of the initiation. It was a terrifyingly absolute vow of secrecy and obedience. The exact wording varied from region to region, but the core promises were always the same. The initiate swore to uphold the holy Vehm and to aid it, for good and for ill, against all persons. He swore to denounce to the court any and all wrongdoing that he came to know, whether by seeing it himself or hearing of it from a trustworthy source. And he swore, above all, to guard the secrets of the Vehm. The oath was explicit in its totality. He swore to keep the secret from his wife and from his child, from his father and from his mother, from his sister and from his brother, from fire and from wind, from all that the sun shines on and the rain wets, from all that is between heaven and earth. And the penalty for breaking this sacred oath was made brutally, viscerally clear. The oath would conclude with a self-curse. The initiate swore that if he were to ever betray the secrets of the Vehm, he would be renounced by all honorable men, and his life would be forfeit. His neck would belong to the rope, his body to the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, and his soul to the devil. He was binding himself to the brotherhood in this life, and in the next. Once the oath was sworn, he was no longer a profane outsider. He was a wissender, a knowing one. He was now a full brother, a Freischof. He was then taught the secret science, the secret signs, words, and grips that would allow him to recognize his fellow initiates. This was the practical key to the network. The methods of recognition were varied and changed over time to maintain secrecy. A common method was a coded phrase. One Schof might cry out as if in distress, "Strang, strang, strang, rope, rope, rope." A true cousin in the crowd would know the correct response, perhaps crying back, "Stock, stock, stock, stick, stick, stick." This cryptic exchange, referencing the instruments of punishment, would instantly identify them to each other, a secret signal hidden in plain sight. With this initiation, the new Schof became a cell in a vast clandestine organism. This was the true power of the Vehm. It was not a centralized police force. It was a distributed network of secret agents, woven into the very fabric of society. Your neighbor, the baker, the blacksmith who shod your horse, the merchant you traded with, the local knight you paid homage to. Any one of them could be a knowing one. This created an atmosphere of pervasive, low-level paranoia that was a powerful deterrent to crime. You never knew who was watching. You never knew who might be a secret judge, listening to your boasts in a tavern, observing your shady business dealings, and preparing to denounce you to the secret court. Every Freischof was now an agent of the tribunal. He was honor-bound by his oath to act as an investigator, to gather information about crimes within his community. And he was also bound to act as the court's instrument. When a summons was issued, it was the local Schoffen who would carry it out, pinning the dagger to the door in the dead of night. And when a sentence of death was passed, every single one of the thousands of initiated members across the land became a potential executioner. The Vehm had no need for professional hangmen. It had an army of them. The power of the Vehmic Brotherhood was not merely in its numbers or its secrecy, but in the institution at its heart, the court itself. This was the Heimlich Act, the secret tribunal. It was a court that operated according to its own ancient rules, a system of justice that was both profoundly public in its traditional settings and utterly secret in its proceedings. The courts were not held in stone buildings. They convened at specific, ancestral locations known as a Freistol or free seat. These were often places that had held a sacred or judicial significance since pre-Christian, Germanic times. A meeting held under the open sky, beneath the boughs of a great linden tree, the traditional Germanic tree of justice, was seen as a sign that the court's judgment was witnessed by God himself, not hidden behind the corrupting walls of man. A session of the court was a solemn and impressive affair. The presiding judge, the freegraf or free count, would take his seat. He was often a local lord or knight who held a charter to convene the court, a charter he claimed stretched back to the time of Charlemagne. Before him, on a table, he would place the two potent symbols of his authority: the sword, representing the power of life, and the strang, the rope, representing the power of death. He could not judge alone. He was required to be assisted by at least 7 initiated Freischofen, who sat as his jurors. Any other knowing one who was in the area was honor-bound to attend the session. A court could sometimes consist of hundreds of initiated members, all gathered to participate in the secret work. The Vehmic courts heard 2 distinct kinds of cases. The first was the Affine-Klage, or the open complaint. These were, for the most part, ordinary civil cases, disputes over debts, land ownership, or inheritance. These proceedings were public. Both the plaintiff and the defendant could appear, present evidence, and the court would issue a judgment. It was in this capacity that the Vehm often acted as a respected and effective form of local justice. But the true, legendary, and feared power of the Vehm lay in its other function, the Heimlich Klage, the secret complaint. This was the criminal tribunal, and its jurisdiction was absolute. It claimed the right to judge the most serious crimes that plagued the land: murder, robbery, rape, treason, and sorcery. And it claimed a special, terrifying jurisdiction over 2 crimes in particular: heresy against the holy Christian faith, and any and all crimes committed against the Holy Vehm itself, especially the breaking of its sacred oath of secrecy. The process of the secret court began with an accusation. Only an initiated Schof could bring a secret complaint. He would approach the freegraf and, under oath, accuse a specific person of a capital crime. He had to provide at least 1 witness, or swear that he had witnessed the crime with his own eyes. If the freegraf and the assembled Schoffen deemed the accusation credible, the court would issue a summons. And it was the summons that was the first act of psychological terror. The accused, if they were not an initiate, was known as the unwissender, the unknowing one. They were living in the profane world, completely unaware that they had been accused and were now the subject of a secret judicial process. The court would dispatch two Schaffen to deliver the summons. The summons was not a written document delivered by a court officer in the light of day. It was a silent, terrifying message delivered in the dead of night. The two Schaffen, the Sendebitan, would travel to the accused home. They would nail a symbolic coin, often a pfennig, to his gate or door, a sign that the property and the person within were now under the jurisdiction of the Vehm. And then they would deliver the summons itself. They would take a dagger and pin it to the main door of the house. The dagger was the message. It was a stark, unmistakable warning. The secret court knows your name, it knows where you live, and it is calling you to judgment. To ignore the summons was not an option. It was an immediate and absolute confession of guilt. The accused, upon finding the dagger, was now faced with an impossible choice. He was summoned to appear before the court at a specific time and place. If he obeyed, he had to face a secret tribunal of judges who were already convinced of his guilt. If he disobeyed and failed to appear after being summoned 3 times, he would be judged in his absence and condemned as a fugitive from justice. If the accused chose to appear, he entered a world designed to intimidate and overwhelm. He stood alone, an unknowing one, in the center of a circle of initiated, knowing ones. He was not allowed a lawyer. The proceedings were in a secret language of ritual and symbol that he did not understand. He was allowed to proclaim his innocence. He could do so by swearing a solemn oath on the cross and the sword. But his own oath was not enough. He had to produce a number of Eidhelfer, or oath-helpers, other men of good character who were willing to come and swear to his innocence. The number of oath-helpers required was often impossibly high. If the accused was an initiated Schaff himself, the process was different but no less terrifying. He could not be convicted on the testimony of a single accuser. The accusation had to be supported by the sworn testimony of at least 6 other Schaffen. It was a trial by the sworn word of his own brothers. If the accused was found innocent, he was free to go. But if he was found guilty either by the verdict of the court or by his failure to appear, the freegraph would stand, take the sword in his hand, and pronounce the sentence. And the sentence of the secret court was always death. The freegraph would declare the condemned man to be verfempt. This was a legal and spiritual condemnation. The man was now outlawed. He had no rights. He was cast out from the protection of God, the emperor, and all laws. His property was forfeit. His wife was a widow, his children orphans. His very life now belonged to the rope. And the duty of carrying out the sentence fell, not to a single state executioner, but to the entire brotherhood. Any Freischof, anywhere in Germany, who encountered the condemned man was now honor-bound by his sacred oath to execute justice on the spot. He was to hang him from the nearest tree. The execution was as swift and as summary as the trial. There was no appeal. After the condemned man was hanged, the executing Schaff would leave the telltale sign that this was not a common murder, but an act of holy justice. He would stick his knife into the tree trunk beside the body, a silent announcement to all who passed by that the holy Vehm had acted. The dagger often bore the cryptic sigil of the court, SSGG. The meaning of these letters is lost to time, but it is thought by many to stand for the rhyming German words Stock, Stein, Gra, grain, stick, stone, grass, tears. This was the terrifying power of the secret court. It was a self-contained system of accusation, judgment, and execution. It was a justice that was inescapable, its agents anonymous, its reach seemingly limitless. For a time, it brought a brutal form of order to a lawless land. But such a system, operating in the dark and beyond any form of appeal, was a power that was destined to be corrupted. Power, especially secret power, is a difficult thing to contain. For a time, in the 14th and early 15th centuries, the Holy Vehm was at the zenith of its influence. It had grown from a local Westphalian institution into the most feared and respected judicial power in all of Germany. Its reputation was so great that its authority was invoked far beyond the borders of the Red Earth. In an age of weak emperors, the Vehmic courts became a kind of shadow government, a secret supreme court for the German nation. Their reach became so great that even the most powerful men in the land sought to align themselves with it. Emperors like Sigismund and Frederick III sought initiation as Freischofen, not to be subject to the court, but to attempt to control it, to harness its fearsome power for their own political ends. The number of initiated, knowing ones swelled into the thousands, creating a clandestine network that permeated every level of German society. But this very success, this immense and unchecked power, contained the seeds of its own downfall. An institution born to fight lawlessness was about to become lawless itself. The Vemic courts were about to overreach, to become corrupted from within, and to face a new kind of world that no longer had any room for their secret justice. The long, slow decline of the secret judges was about to begin. The first sign of decay was a decline in the quality of the brotherhood itself. As the order's fame and power grew, membership became a desirable status symbol, a tool for personal advancement and protection. The strict, ancient requirements for initiation that a man be real, true, and free began to be relaxed. Ambitious and unscrupulous Freigrafen, or presiding judges, began to initiate men of low character in exchange for money or political favors. Criminals, bandits, and professional assassins infiltrated the sacred brotherhood, using the cloak of the Vehm's secrecy to protect their own illicit activities. The vast network of knowing ones was being poisoned from within. With this corruption of its membership came the corruption of its justice. The Heimlich Act, the secret tribunal that was meant to be a terror to the wicked, now became a terror to the innocent as well. The courts were increasingly hijacked to serve private interests. A powerful merchant could use his influence within the Vehm to accuse a business rival of a crime, and have him summoned and condemned. A nobleman could settle a personal feud by having his enemy declared verfempt and legally murdered. A summons from the Vehm was no longer necessarily a call to answer for a real crime. It could be a tool of extortion. A wealthy man might receive the dreaded dagger on his door, only to be quietly informed that the case against him would be dropped in exchange for a hefty payment. The sacred institution was becoming a protection racket. The secret judges were becoming secret gangsters. This abuse of power inevitably led to a backlash. The Vehm's overreach began to provoke fierce resistance. The powerful free cities of the Hanseatic League began to refuse to recognize the Vehm's authority, closing their gates to its messengers and protecting their citizens from its summons. More importantly, the great territorial princes of the empire, who had once sought to use the Vehm, now saw it as a direct threat to their own sovereignty. They could not tolerate a secret judicial power operating within their lands, a power that claimed an authority higher than their own courts and their own laws. They began to actively suppress the Vehm. They issued decrees forbidding their subjects from taking the Vemic oath. They declared that any Schaff who attempted to carry out a Vemic sentence within their territory would be arrested and executed as a common murderer. The world was changing. The chaotic, lawless age of Fistlaw that had given birth to the Vehm was slowly coming to an end. The late 15th and early 16th centuries saw the rise of a new kind of power in Germany. The modern, centralized territorial state. The great princes were building powerful, centralized bureaucracies. They were establishing their own formal, public court systems, staffed by university-trained lawyers who relied not on secret tradition, but on the comprehensive written principles of Roman law. The Emperor Maximilian I, at the end of the 15th century, created a new imperial supreme court, the Reichskammergericht, as the final court of appeal for the entire empire. This was a new vision of justice, a justice that was public, written, professional, and based on a clear, hierarchical system of appeals. It was the complete antithesis of the Vemic system, which was secret, oral, amateur, and absolute. The new, modern state, with its monopoly on law and violence, simply had no place for a parallel secret justice system rooted in the traditions of a bygone age. And a new technology delivered the final blow to the Vehm's most precious asset: its secrecy. The invention of the printing press in the mid-15th century meant that the secret oaths, the cryptic passwords, and the ritual procedures of the Vemic courts could be exposed to the entire world. Pamphlets and books were published that laid bare the secret science of the Freischaffen, stripping it of its mystery and its terror. Faced with the growing power of the state, crippled by its own internal corruption, and exposed by the new technology of print, the Vemic courts began a long, slow, and irreversible decline. They were driven back into their original heartland of Westphalia. Their jurisdiction shrank. Their membership dwindled. They became a shadow of their former selves, a local curiosity rather than a national power. The last official Vemic court, by this point little more than a historical relic, was formally abolished by order of Jerome Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother and the then King of Westphalia, in the year 1811. The historical Vehm was dead. Its time had passed. But its ghost, the powerful and romantic legend of a secret court dispensing a terrible, swift justice in the dead of night, was about to be resurrected and reimagined by a new generation. An institution can be abolished. A tradition can die out. But a story, especially a good story, can be immortal. Just as the last historical Vemic courts were fading into obscurity, their ghost was being resurrected and given a spectacular new life. The secret judges of Westphalia were discovered by a new and powerful movement, one that was not interested in the messy realities of medieval law, but was captivated by their mystery, their power, and their deep connection to the German soil. This was the age of German Romanticism. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, as Germany struggled for national identity in the shadow of Napoleonic domination, writers, poets and artists began to look to the nation's own medieval past for inspiration. They rejected the cold rationalism of the French Enlightenment and celebrated instead the power of emotion, of nature, and of the unique organic German spirit, the Volksgeist. And in the half-forgotten legend of the Holy Vehm, they found a perfect symbol. They were fascinated by the court's Gothic atmosphere, their secret moonlit meetings, their arcane rituals, and their terrifying swift justice. The Freischaffen were reimagined. They were no longer seen as a flawed and sometimes corrupt medieval institution. They became heroic figures, noble vigilantes, the embodiment of a pure, ancient, and uniquely German sense of justice. The Vehmic courts became a staple of German Romantic literature. The greatest of all German writers, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, wrote a dramatic historical play, Götz von Berlichingen, which featured a dramatic scene of a Vehmic tribunal in a subterranean vault, condemning one of the play's villains. The legend was introduced to the English-speaking world by the master of the historical novel, Sir Walter Scott. In his 1829 novel, Anne of Geierstein, Scott portrayed the Vehmic courts as a vast, mysterious, and all-powerful secret tribunal, an unseen power whose reach extended throughout the empire. His hugely popular novel cemented the image of the Vehm in the international imagination as the ultimate medieval secret society. Through these and countless other novels, poems, and plays, the Vehm was transformed. It became a powerful symbol of German nationalism. The secret judges were portrayed as the guardians of the true, ancient German law, standing in righteous opposition to the corrupt, foreign, Roman law that had been imposed upon the nation. They were the authentic voice of the German Volk, a secret brotherhood protecting the nation from its internal and external enemies. This romantic, heroic, and deeply nationalistic ghost would haunt the German imagination for the next century. And it was a ghost that would eventually be summoned for a far darker purpose. A century later, Germany was once again a land of chaos and perceived humiliation. Defeated in World War I and burdened by the punitive Treaty of Versailles, the new, democratic Weimar Republic was born into a world of political instability and violent extremism. The nation was torn apart by putschs, uprisings, and political assassinations from both the far left and the far right. In this toxic atmosphere, many on the nationalist right began to see the democratic government itself as a betrayal, a stab in the back that had sold out the German nation. They believed that the republic was filled with traitors, Republican politicians, communists, socialists, and Jews who were destroying Germany from within. And they believed that the official courts of this traitorous republic would not, or could not, deliver true justice. And so they decided to create their own. Extreme right-wing, nationalist paramilitary groups, many of them formed from the disillusioned veterans of the war, the Freikorps, began a secret campaign of political murder. They assassinated hundreds of their political opponents. And for these acts of political terror, they resurrected a powerful and chilling name from the past. They called them Femimord Vehm murders. These modern assassins saw themselves as the direct heirs of the medieval Freischaffen. They believed they were a new holy Vehm, a secret tribunal acting on behalf of the betrayed German nation. They were not murderers, they told themselves. They were executioners. They were carrying out a higher, sacred national justice against the traitors who were poisoning the Volk. They created their own secret courts, holding clandestine trials, where their political enemies were condemned in absentia. An order would be given, and a hit squad would be dispatched to carry out the sentence. The murder of the foreign minister Walther Rathenau in 1922 was just the most famous of these hundreds of political assassinations. The romantic ghost of the Vehm had been twisted into a justification for a campaign of right-wing death squads. When Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power in 1933, this perverse legacy was not rejected. It was officially embraced and amplified. The Nazi ideology, particularly in its more esoteric and mystical wing, was obsessed with creating a mythic, heroic Germanic past. And the legend of the Vehmic courts fit their narrative perfectly. For the Nazis, the Vehm was a model of pure, Aryan justice, a system that was ruthless, decisive, and based on the instinct of the race rather than on decadent foreign legal codes. Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS and a man obsessed with medieval German history and occultism, was particularly fascinated by the Vehm. The SS, his new Teutonic order of black uniformed knights, saw itself as a modern successor to both the medieval knights of the Teutonic order and the secret judges of the Vehm. The principles of the Vehmic courts were a direct historical precedent for the Nazis' own form of justice. The idea of a secret court, the use of terror to enforce political will, the belief in an extrajudicial right to execute enemies of the people, all of this was mirrored in the actions of the Gestapo and the SS. The infamous Nazi Night of the Long Knives in 1934, where Hitler's internal party rivals were rounded up and murdered without trial, was in essence a massive femimord, a Vehmic purge on a national scale. The romantic ghost of the 19th century had been fully transformed into the Nazi nightmare of the 20th. The complex, medieval institution, which had arisen to provide order in a lawless land, had its name and its legend hijacked and perverted to justify the greatest lawlessness and barbarism the world had ever seen. It was the final and most terrible chapter in the long afterlife of the secret judges. And so, we are left with the many ghosts of the holy Vehm. We have the historical reality of a medieval court. We have the heroic ghost of the romantic imagination. And we have the monstrous nightmare of its 20th century appropriation. After this long journey through the forests of history and myth, we must return to our final question. What were the Vehmic courts? Let us first be clear about what they were not. They were not, as some later, more speculative theories have claimed, a direct ancestor of Freemasonry or the Bavarian Illuminati. While all were secret societies, their fundamental purpose and character were entirely different. The Vehmic courts were not a philosophical or mystical fraternity dedicated to esoteric enlightenment or the creation of a new utopian world order. Their focus was far more immediate, more practical, and more brutal. They were a judicial institution, concerned with the judgment and punishment of past crimes, not the philosophical shaping of the future. Their secret was a secret of law, not of gnosis. What they were, in historical reality, was a unique and remarkable product of their specific time and place. They were an improvised solution to a profound crisis of law and order. In the anarchy of the late medieval German Empire, an age of weak emperors and predatory local lords, the Vehmic courts arose to fill a vacuum. They offered a form of justice that was swift, decisive, and, above all, effective. To the peasant whose village was terrorized by a robber knight, or the merchant whose caravan was plundered on the road, the holy Vehm may well have seemed like a divine intervention, a righteous and necessary force for order in a lawless world. Their immense power was derived from a potent combination of ancient tradition and ingenious design. Their claim of a sacred mandate from Charlemagne gave them an authority that seemed to transcend the petty squabbles of local lords. Their proceedings, held in the open air at an ancient freistall, drew on a deep well of pre-Christian Germanic legal tradition, a sense of justice that was rooted in the land and the community itself, not in the dusty codes of foreign Roman law. And their structure as a secret society was a work of brutal efficiency. The vast, anonymous network of initiated Schaffen made them seem omnipresent. The terrifying, symbolic summons of the dagger made them seem inescapable. And the sacred, binding power of their oaths, which made every member a potential executioner, made their sentences absolute. But this very structure, the source of their strength, was also their greatest and most terrible flaw. A system of justice that operates in secret, without public scrutiny, without a formal process of appeal, without the possibility of review, is a system that is profoundly, terrifyingly ripe for abuse. Power, especially the absolute power over life and death, corrupts. And the secret power of the Vehm corrupted absolutely. The institution that was born to punish criminals became, in time, a tool for criminals. The courts were used to settle private grudges, to extort the wealthy, and to carry out political assassinations. The sacred brotherhood became a protection racket. The noble vigilante became a contract killer. The story of the Vehmic courts is ultimately a story about the very nature of justice itself. It asks a profound and deeply unsettling question. When the official, public law fails to protect the innocent and punish the guilty, who has the right to enforce the peace? And what happens when the guardians themselves become the predators? It is a timeless cautionary tale about the immense danger of secret power. It shows how a movement founded with the noblest of intentions to bring order to chaos can, through its own lack of transparency and accountability, become a source of chaos itself. The Vehmic courts are a forgotten flame from the German Middle Ages. Their historical reality has been almost completely consumed by the more exciting ghosts of Romantic literature and the more horrific phantoms of Nazi propaganda. But their true story is more complex and more relevant than any of the legends. It is the story of a secret that was hidden in the open sky, a testament to a dark and violent age when justice could be delivered by a dagger pinned to a door, and a sentence of death could be carried out by any man, on any road, under any tree. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the secret world of the Holy Vehm. Their story is a powerful reminder that the search for justice can lead down dark and mysterious paths, and that the line between a guardian and a tyrant can be perilously thin. What are your thoughts on the Vehmic courts? Were they a necessary force for order in a lawless time, or a dangerous vigilante conspiracy that inevitably went too far? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoy these deep dives into the forgotten corners of history, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Driftwood Histories for more tales found adrift in time. We are grateful for your support. Until next time, stay curious.